Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about a video that I made. It'll be out in a couple weeks. I'm just going to reference the title. If men got their shit together, then the world would be solved. Most of the world's problems that we have would be taken care of if men were able to, again, get their shit in order. However, in this video, I want to touch on, because in that I kind of harp on men in a pretty hard way, which I think is needed, but I want to talk about some of the prerequisites as to how young and there's lack of guidance for men so that when they get into the real world, their level of chance of succeeding in literally almost anything is pretty slim to none. And how important some of these things are that we're going to talk about on like an individual level for you to really look at and be honest with like what the actual root of some of these things is. Some of the main ones is going to be emotional intelligence, so not being taught how to handle emotions, not being taught how to control your sexuality, not being taught the importance of physicality and food, and not being shown and properly guided in how to channel like the raw power that men hold on a physical and a spiritual level. Because and why those things are all targeted so effectively in society. This is speaking from someone who's experienced something on all front on all of those categories I have experience in and have overcome a big portion of some of those. Obviously, you're always, have room for improvement. So I'm not pretending to have figured it all out. But from where I started when I was young to who I am now, I assumed for a long time that everyone was doing the stuff that I was doing, or everyone saw some of these issues. And then over the last couple of years, starting to see like, oh, this is a bigger issue than I anticipated. And it's beyond religion, it's beyond politics. It's, in my opinion, it's very much so spiritual. And once you view it in that lens, not trying to over spiritualize some of these things, but once you realize, and to build a framework of this, I believe that we are spiritual beings first, and then physicality comes second. And all the things that I mentioned is interconnected. So there's this book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's written by this psychologist, and I don't remember when it was written, but the main concept of the book is basically there's no separation from your physical body and your mind and your emotions. So if something happens to you emotionally, it may manifest in some physical ailments, so cancer, joint pain, immune disorders, whatever it may be. And so if you look at, say, food, right, and how that targets the body, that will then numb and dumb down your gut and your ability to trust your gut and to listen to your intuition properly. And so as a young man, if you're growing up and from society, you are I'm 30 years old. So most of my life hearing and seeing from whether it be society, media, people that I've been around, hearing the general tone towards men is extremely negative in a really sad way. And I don't say that for any kind of sympathy at all. It's more so just to bring awareness of like, okay, are we going to think about why that's happening? Like, why is that being targeted in such a crazy way? Because I believe that men innately are incredibly capable of holding a standard, especially when the world or the government or society is somewhat collapsing, which ours is. And I see a lot of change, and I see a lot of potential for that to improve over time. But it makes sense why they are being targeted in a wild way. And so if men are again told, whether it be subconsciously or consciously, that being strong, that being powerful and dangerous is either toxic, which is a fucking wild concept, to be honest. That idea is crazy. Or it's unmanly or whatever it is, then unless you have really strong willpower, you're going to kind of become susceptible to that. And you're not going to take care of your body. And then that cascades, you do that from a very young age. By the time you hit 30, you're kind of not fucked, but like it's going to be a hard hole to get out of. So that's one area where realizing like what that does. I think there's the level of most men nowadays, their testosterone is like a tenth of what it used to be. And a big part of that I think is food and the lack of doing dangerous things, to be honest. That's another component of this where I don't think the world targets this, but I think it's been naturally taken away from society is doing dangerous things. So when I was in school, we would do some pretty crazy shit. And where I went to school was like a military style EMS training academy. And so we're naturally doing dangerous things, right? But like rappelling off of massive cliffs and buildings and diving into the ocean, like all of this cool shit that it wakes something up inside every man. I've never done something like that with another man, whether it be riding dirt bikes, shooting guns, diving, skydiving, whatever it may be, where it's very primal and doing dangerous things. Our society is very docile, and it needs to be. You need to seek it out. Now, yes, you can, do rites of passage. You can go out to those schools, right? But it's like on the day to day, how many men are really choosing danger over comfort? Most men aren't. So I think that's part of it as well. Another huge component of this, and this will probably be its own video in of itself at some point, is the lack of sexual guidance for men, and specifically the porn industry and how that fucking ruins people's lives, how it really truly can. And it, I can't even imagine nowadays growing up with cell phones like 5 years old, right? So like obviously when I was younger, it was a very different story of what what you had to try to find or what you were exposed to. But unfortunately, you have two opposing polarities. You either have the religious worldviews of sexuality, and this applies to women in its own rights, but I'm going to talk just to the men aspect for this, for the sake of this video. So from a religious point of view, it's very shame based and it's not talked about, and it's something that you can't talk about it until you get married, and then it's totally okay, but you still don't really talk about it. It's just like everything was okay at that point. Or you have the worldview of sexuality and everything goes. And yet we are an over sexualized culture, yet there's still real no guidance and real no like teachings of how to use that. So like sexual energy is the essence of who you are. It is the, again, not the essence, but like it's the life force of your being. And so if you think about that being targeted the way that it is, we'll just say, once someone hits puberty, they're then exposed, especially nowadays with phones, the amount of stuff they're exposed to online is literally rewiring the way that their brain views sex, views themselves through that lens, and then also how they view women. And so much of this again is subconscious. It's such a like once you dive into the psychology of it, it's kind of scary. And this is not to elicit fear, it's just to bring awareness to the actual problem. Because I honestly think, and this is not proven, but it kind of makes sense to a certain degree, where you look at older men that are like still attracted to like teenagers, because that's a whole thing, right? My current theory on that is like they've never grown up sexually. They've never matured sexually from when they were a teenager. They still are viewing the opposite sex in that same lens. And so I'm not making a judgment of is porn bad, is it not? Are certain things good or bad? It's just more so a lack of reading the terms and conditions of those experiences, because again, spirituality is directly correlated to that. So you can look up and do some research when it comes to like tantric practices, different yogic practices that work with the spine and work with sexual energy. And that's another whole rabbit trail for a different time. But my point in bringing that up now is that affects us on a spiritual level. It's not just a physical act you're doing. It also then becomes a reflux. So as someone who's struggled out for a very long time, and there's so much shame hardwired built into that, because again, growing up in a religious environment, it's very difficult to separate the shame. And shame is a very dense, heavy emotion. And so you are like a walking contradiction, but you don't know why, because you're like, well, this is a very natural part of being a young man. The amount of drive you have as a teenager in your 20s and 30s, if you're a healthy individual, is fucking crazy. But if no one's guiding you and telling you like, hey, this is how you channel it, this is how you can move that energy into different parts of your body or different parts of your life, because it is creation energy. So if you're not in partnership, if you're not creating children, how do you use that energy, right? How can you bring awareness and attention to your body, to those sensations? Don't judge them. It's very natural. It's part of, it's a good sign actually. Yet society, it's again where it's over sexualized, but it's no one talks about this on either side really, men or women. I don't think that men have the monopoly on this per se. I think it just manifests a little bit differently. And so you then again fast forward to once this person's mature. I remember when I was younger and started to struggle with this in my teens, early teens, and having no guidance and being like, oh, it will just solve itself out when I become older, or like very confused about if everyone else struggled with this or what it was. And then again, as I've gotten older, gotten over that, thankfully, and seen the other side, it's like, oh wow, there's so much to this. This is not just like something you do when you're in your teens. If you don't realize, because I see some men that are like, oh yeah, I don't participate in that anymore, or whatever, and they're almost like white knuckling it. Now, there's some men that maybe don't have any issues at all, which is amazing. Fuck yeah, you're an anomaly. But I've never met a man, I've never come in contact with another grown man that has not struggled with this part of life in some way, shape, or form at some point. And that's telling to me, because that means that that's going to then influence the way that he shows up, consciously or unconsciously, especially if he has not addressed this part of his life. And then again, back to the idea that the energy has to go somewhere. Where will that go? If it's not being offloaded, no pun intended, uh, then it's going to go into your work. It's going to go into your own body. It's going to recirculate. It's going to go into your partnership, right? You're going to become magnetic in a way that you can't really fake. And so again, it becomes spiritual in the sense it's attacking your body in a spiritual way, masked as just a form of relaxation. And another really interesting thing to think about is if a product is free, you are the product. Most porn is free. Obviously, you can pay for certain things, right? But you don't have to pay for some pretty crazy stuff online if you really want to. And that's just something that I think really needs to be discussed, because again, I can't even imagine what these young people are going to be experiencing when it comes to AI, robotics, the kind of stuff they have access to. It 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 needs, we need to have some level of awareness for when they become aware enough to be like, this actually isn't good. And it's not like a, I don't make it sound serious because it's not solvable. I take it seriously because it's, you're playing with you're playing with your life in a way, like again, the life force that you can create something. You're playing with that unconsciously. You don't know. I had to stumble upon that when I was in my late teens and early 20s. I was able to finally be around some older men that I was able to learn some things from, and that just took me on a whole journey from there. Yet it was something that I kind of always knew intuitively, but then I'm like, all right, if you don't have that intuitive knowing and you have this part of your life, then like that's really kind of scary. So that's one of the areas where, again, I think if men were able to learn and be guided in that, and realize that it's not going to get any easier as you get older, it's going to become more sophisticated and it will become more subtle. So that's one of the areas. And then the other one is going to be substances. So this is kind of a substance that we just referenced, whether it be drinking, smoking, whatever it may be. Those are not bad things, but just realizing how, especially in certain work cultures, how those are normalized. And it's like, again, those are all coping mechanisms to a certain degree, and it's affecting your ability to have a clear channel for your body to show up, and how society pushes that. So take, for one example, sports. I love sports. I think they're cool. However, look at what the masses of people that watch sports on weekends, the food they eat and what they drink, those two things, it's numbing out their body in a way. And maybe you had a long week. Maybe that's how you relax. But this is where, if you're wanting to improve, or if you're wanting to think better yourself, realizing that there kind of is a trade-off at some point where you have to be like, okay, if I am wanting X, Y, and Z, I can't keep eating fill in the blank and drinking fill in the blank because my body is gonna again not feel clear. And it's just becoming so sophisticated. I mean, there's a quote from I think the Roman times where like the whole idea of a Colosseum. You can look this up online where if you keep people entertained and fed, they will never revolt. And this is where I think a lot of men need to realize that is being done now in a way where it's, again, the sophistication of it is impressive. I have to give them that. Like, it truly is impressive. And again, this is not me judging or demonizing sports or drinking or any of that. Coming back to, are you doing it consciously? And have you ever gone without it? Like, is there a period of time where you haven't indulged in some of those things? Have you really looked at that part of your life and be like, yeah, this is a conscious choice. I'm going to keep fucking with this. Cool. Then, like, this idea is for those of you that want to try and remove yourself from that and to really look at, like, how do you spend your time? How do you take care of your body? And then also, I think another part of this, and this is a little more subtle, is what the world says about men. Again, whether that be through media, through movies, through just societal programming. Um, what do they say about that? And then how do you relate to that and not let that bog you down? It's not easy. Don't get me wrong. It's not an easy thing to be able to just remove yourself. Like, cool. Because once you kind of see why that's being done, for me at least, it almost gives me more fuel. I'm like, all right, they see, or it knows how powerful I believe men are if we are grounded, emotionally intelligent. We know who we are. We know that we are protected and guided, and we know what we're about. You can't touch that. You can't interfere with that. You can't control that. And whoever they are, right? It's not like a conspiracy thing. It's just like just society. That's scary because in the past there have been men that have made that not good, right? Been either very abusive, very hurtful, right? That's not okay, and that's not being a man, in my opinion. Um, so yeah, I want to say these things because again, in the video that will come out in a few weeks when it comes to if men got their shit together. I don't touch on some of these things as much per se, but these are some of the ones that I think really need to be looked at, especially if you have young men, where they're going to be thrown into a world that will eat them up if they are not given the proper tools and given the proper warning in terms and conditions of some of these things, where their life is going to get ruined real fucking quicker than I think people realize, to be honest. And my hope in talking about some of these things is to bring awareness to it and also to try and give some level of, I guess, my experience of some of those in the sense of like what I've done to try and overcome, or what I've done to overcome some of those things. And part of that, I guess, a good time to share this would be to not judge yourself for being not attacked, but to not judge yourself for the things that you were maybe participating in when you were younger and didn't know any better, right? But as soon as you know better, as soon as you know and are shown another way, then it's your responsibility to then try and figure it out. So for me, that's looked like trying different things, working with different coaches or therapists, or reading books, or going to the gym, working on my food. Like you just kind of start workshopping shit until you find something that works. But until you find something that works, like just don't stop. That I would say is the simplest thing. Is like if you feel a pull to any of the stuff that we've talked about, and you're like, I don't know what to do. It's like, well, just try something. Literally, just try something. Google something, read a book, and then go from there. Because even if it's not, you're not going to get it right the first time. Newsflash, or probably the second, third, or fourth. But if you just keep going, I think that's one of the easiest, or it's one of the things that I've noticed over time is like if you just don't give up, if you literally just don't give up, you will eventually get out on the other side. And in that, then you're able to help other people and you're able to start having a strong foundation for your community, for the society that you're a part of as a man. Because I think that is something that is not a new issue of like, where are all the real men? It's like, well, they're being targeted in such a crazy way. Like a stat that never ceases to blow my mind and slash sadden me is the amount of men that commit suicide daily. Is I think over 100 an hour. And as a man, I get it. Like I understand why they do that because you're shown in society this is what you should be. Yet there are no tools given to those men to get there. And as men, the way that our brains work is if we have a threat or if we have something that we can't handle, the easiest way for us is just to remove the threat. That's just a biological primal instinct, right? So the threat that most men are opting out of is just the emotional, back to the emotions, right? Is the emotional weight of like, I don't know what to do, I can't handle it, no one's shown me, I'm done. And so that's another part of this too, where it's like it's really sad to think about that, yet no one's talking about it in a way where I'm not saying it needs to be talked about on a daily basis. I definitely don't talk about it on a daily basis, but I mean, like, what are we doing about that? Because that's not going away. That issue is not going away. So again, next week the other video will come out. It will kind of be in tandem with this one. Hopefully, it will be a helpful 1-2 punch for everybody. Appreciate you guys watching. Any questions about what we talked about today, or more expansion of some of these topics, if you want, put it in the comments. Some of these topics I'll be talking about, they will be weaved into a lot of this because it's very important, I believe, for men and for women. I think next time I'll bring the female side of it in as well, because there's a part of this that affects them as well in a crazy way, right? Because we're all connected. There's no real separation. It's just an illusion. Um, but I wanted to touch on the male side of it today. So much love to you all. I hope you have a beautiful day. And I will see you next time. Cheers.